Okay.
So Tendayi, we are both in the PLC team.
Yes.
We are. And I wanted to make a little kind of video really to address some feedback I've had from the efficacy and research members of product councils. And what they've said is they go to product council and they often find that the way people are presenting risky assumptions is not always, their riskiest assumptions is not always in the right priority order.
Right.
And what they're telling me is that, for example, they might have a risky assumption about whether someone in the business can deliver on an element required to move from validate to grow, when actually they might be ignoring the risky assumption about whether the people involved, the users, customers, learners, might actually like the solution they're talking about. So it's a question of prioritising risk in the right way. Is this something you've come across in any situation?
Yeah, no, you're right. So when we're talking about risky assumptions, what we're talking about is the most important element of your entire business model that if you got wrong, would cause the product to completely fail.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so those assumptions are then organized in a hierarchy. So some things matter before other things.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter whether or not technology can deliver a product if nobody wants it. Right? So whether or not somebody wants the product, if that's an unsolved question, that's a more important question than whether or not we can create the product.
Yeah.
And then whether or not we can make money from the product, whether the pricing point is correct, is less important unless we're sure that we're making something that delivers value. So you order these things in a hierarchy that goes from who wants it, have we made the right thing, what's the right price point, can we build it? So you can solve these things going in a hierarchy. And what I find is that teams will want to work on the assumptions that are easiest for them to do, right? So the things that are easy for them to get answers for. But we actually say, do the most difficult things first. Do the things that would cause you to stop if the answer was negative.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And what I've also found quite interesting when looking at the risky assumptions that are being presented is it is often the ones about the learners as well from an efficacy standpoint that are not kind of flushed out as much as they should be. And it's often going to be about creating those learner outcomes and being able to actually find evidence about that. That's going to be the most important thing to do. It's, as you say, if the product doesn't deliver what it's supposed to deliver, the value to the user, whether that's a customer or a learner, what's the point in doing it?
Exactly. And I think as a business, we have to start to be honest about that, right? So what matters most, whether or not we can sell a product or whether or not it delivers value from an efficacy standpoint.
Right.
And so one of the reasons why teams may not raise efficacy issues as risky assumptions is because they know that at the doorstep, they can push the product without ever having to answer that question to the customer.
Yeah.
And so to what extent are we authentically honest about the fact that just as a company, we want to deliver products that deliver on learner outcomes? And then if that's something that is not yet resolved, to what extent are we willing to pause, answer that question, and then proceed? That is something that the product council has to really take ownership of. And then teams know that this is something that's of value to the company I work for, and therefore I have to make sure I answer that question before I answer others. And so the question is, to what extent our product council is going to stop a project because it doesn't meet learner outcomes, even though they have a revenue target next year?
So the interesting discussion I had with the efficacy and research teams was that they will not stop a product, but what they will do is follow up incredibly quickly before that product team can move much further.
Right.
So you might get approved subject to gathering the right evidence.
Right.
But absolutely, and I like your idea of saying, let's confront, even if it feels really difficult, let's actually make it the most important thing.
Yes, I mean,
do or die.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.